Hey guys, tonight, the air in Tudor London feels heavy like rainwater trapped in smoke. You stand in a narrow street where the walls lean toward each other, their timber frames dark and swollen from years of damp. Somewhere above, a shutter slams against brick, and a woman shouts at a man you'll never see. The ground beneath you is slick with something you hope is only mud. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. The smell hits you next, a strange duet of roasted meat, wet straw, and sewage. You hear a cart creak past, its wheels groaning under barrels of ale. The driver curses, and the horse answers with a tired snort. A baker's chimney exhales flour smoke into the fog, while across the lane, someone empties a chamber pot with the accuracy of prayer. You flinch, step aside, and realize you're already part of this world, one where survival smells a lot like compromise. Tonight, you'll wander through this city of fog and filth, through markets alive with noise, inns filled with laughter and disease, alleys that never see sunlight. You'll see how people lived, worked and ate under a sky the color of pewter, and why you, soft and modern, wouldn't last a single day here. Welcome to Tudor London, beautiful, brutal, and gloriously alive. You wake to the sound of bells. Not the kind that mark joy, but the kind that tell you London's awake before you are. Their echoes slides through the fog, heavy and metallic, settling in the cracks of the timber walls around you. The air inside your room feels stale, thick with the scent of wood smoke and something damp that never truly leaves. When you step outside, the cold greets you like a handshake that lasts too long. The streets stretch narrow and uneven, stitched together with mud and refuse. You hear the squelch beneath your boots, that sticky rhythm of the city's heartbeat. A baker nearby opens his shop, and the smell of fresh bread cuts through the rot like a sermon that almost saves you. That mattered because London's survival depended on its ability to disguise decay with aroma. Every pleasant scent here is performing. A woman passes carrying a basket of eels, their slick bodies twisting lazily against the wicker. The smell chases her like a rumor. Salt, river, and iron. Fishmongers set up stalls beside butchers, and for one brief moment, the scents duel for dominance. You step between them, dizzy from the collision. That mattered because the Thames wasn't just water, it was the city's stomach, both feeding and poisoning it with the same hand. Farther down the lane, you catch the hiss of hot tar being poured into the cracks of a leaking roof. The sound is oddly soothing, like bacon in a pan. The workers hum to themselves, half melody, half complaint. London repairs itself constantly, but only enough to keep from collapsing entirely. That mattered because permanence here was too expensive. Endurance had to suffice. You breathe in the tar's sweetness and feel your lungs quietly object. You pass a tanner's yard and the world abruptly turns hostile. The stench of rotting hides, piss, and lye burns your throat. Men stand waist-deep in vats, stirring skins with long poles, their arms pale and slick with residue. They don't look up as you pass. That mattered because class in Tudor London was olfactory. Your worth was the distance between you and the smell of your own work. You hold your breath until the air forgives you. At the corner, a chimney sweep coughs black into his sleeve. He grins at you, teeth flashing through soot, and you can't tell if it's friendliness or warning. Behind him, smoke curls into the grey sky like a permanent bruise. London breathes through its chimneys, each one a throat exhaling exhaustion. That mattered because this city didn't grow. It burned itself larger. You exhale too, realizing you've started to match its rhythm. The street widens suddenly into Cheapside Market, where the air thickens with possibility. Apples glisten with waxy brightness, meat hangs in open air, buzzing with flies. You smell sugar loaves wrapped in paper, warm honey, spilled ale, and damp wool. It's overwhelming, intoxicating, and slightly nauseating. That mattered because prosperity here was measured by how much the air could hold without collapsing. You feel both hungry and sick. A beggar calls out, his voice raw but polite. "Alms for the poor," he says, extending a wooden bowl. You notice his hands, thin, cracked, trembling slightly. Around him, people pass without looking. In Tudor London, charity was a performance too, best practiced when others watched. You drop a coin anyway, though you're not sure if it helps or just buys you a cleaner conscience. A horse trudges by, pulling a cart of refuse. You can hear the wet scrape of waste being dragged toward the river. The smell rises and fades, replaced by the faint sweetness of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor. London's air, you realize, is a constant negotiation between suffering and survival. That mattered because the city never wanted you comfortable, only awake. You adjust your collar and keep walking. A woman empties her chamber pot from an upper window, shouting "Gardez-Lou." The stream hits the cobblestone beside you with a splash, too close for luck. The onlookers laugh, and so do you, mostly out of disbelief. Hygiene here is theatre, and the audience always loses. That mattered because Tudor London didn't bother pretending to be clean, only to be busy. You step aside, deciding that some stains are inevitable. The bells ring again, dull and tired, marking the hour. The sound bounces between walls like gossip, spreading faster than the wind. You realize every tone means something here: hunger, work, prayer, fire, death. The city doesn't speak with words, it clangs. That mattered because silence in London is suspicious. You pull your cloak tighter, already missing it. As the morning thickens into day, the smells blend into something you almost accept: smoke, bread, dung, sweat, and rain. Together, they form the scent of existence, stubborn and unashamed. You take a deep breath, coughing once, but smiling. That mattered because life here isn't pleasant. It's persistent. And somehow, that's enough. You follow the smell of salt and rot until you reach the Thames, wide and sluggish under a pale sky. The river breathes mist, cool and grey, wrapping the city in a damp embrace. Seagulls wheel above, crying like ghosts that never stopped complaining. The air tastes metallic, and every sound feels muted, as if soaked in water before reaching your ears. You stand by the pier, where ropes creak and wood moans under the weight of waiting ships. The river moves like a tired giant, carrying everything: barrels, refuse, fish, corpses, ambition. You watch a ferryman push off, his oar slicing through the film of scum floating on the surface. He hums softly, unconcerned by what floats beside him. That mattered because the Thames wasn't scenery, it was infrastructure, a street for the dead and the living alike. You realize the water never judges what it swallows. Nearby, women wash linen in the shallows, their skirts wet and heavy. The soap smells faintly of ash and lavender, a fragile effort against filth. Their laughter rises above the splash of water, light and resilient. You can see their hands red from cold, fingers raw, but steady. That mattered because cleanliness here wasn't health, it was pride. Even in mud, they fought to stay human. A barge drifts past loaded with barrels of ale, the air thick with malt and yeast. Men shout orders over the creak of wood, their voices carrying like songs sung too many times. The sound is both chaotic and harmonious, London's version of music. That mattered because rhythm made work survivable. You tap your foot unconsciously, already part of the beat. Further downriver, a butcher tosses scraps into the current, and the water ripples with hungry movement. Rats dart along the bank, sleek and bold. You feel the hair on your neck rise, not from fear, but from the realization that London never wastes anything, not even decay. That mattered because the city's genius was in turning filth into fuel. You watch a rat leap into the river and vanish like punctuation swallowed by a sentence too long. The tide pulls in and out, slow and deliberate. You notice how the river changes color. Green in morning, brown by noon, black by dusk. It reflects the mood of the day like a mirror that lies gently. That mattered because time in Tudor London wasn't measured by clocks but by the river's patience. You could tell everything you needed to know just by the smell. A boy nearby tries to fish, his line trembling in the current. He looks too clean to belong here, a visitor, maybe, or simply young enough to still believe in luck. Minutes later, he pulls up something that isn't a fish. You don't ask what it is. He doesn't either. He drops it back quietly, eyes older now. That mattered because innocence here has a short shelf life. You turn away, pretending not to notice. A bridge looms ahead. London Bridge, its arches packed with houses like teeth. From below, you can hear the rumble of carts above and the slap of water against stone. The smell of roasted meat drifts down from a tavern perched dangerously close to the edge. You imagine dining above a river full of everything you'd rather forget. That mattered because irony kept London sane. You smile. It still works. Bells toll again from St. Mary's across the bank, their sound softened by mist. A funeral procession moves along the pier, men in black cloaks carrying a wooden coffin to a waiting boat. The priest mutters Latin, his voice half swallowed by fog. You realize this river carries everyone eventually, the merchants, the beggars, the kings. That mattered because equality in Tudor London existed only in decomposition. You watch the boat drift away until it disappears. The wind shifts and the smell of rain rolls in, cold and metallic. You feel the first drops hit your face, soft, apologetic. The water around you ripples with them, tiny crowns dissolving instantly. That mattered because London's rain always knew how to arrive without interrupting. You pull your cloak tighter and keep watching. As the storm thickens, the city vanishes behind a wall of mist. You hear nothing but the pulse of water and the sigh of wood. It's beautiful in a grim, forgiving way, like a bruise healing slowly. That mattered because this river never pretended to be clean. It only promised to carry everything that couldn't stay still. You breathe in deeply, and the air tastes like history. By the time the rain stops, the tide has turned. The ferryman returns, his boat heavy with passengers and secrets. He nods to you as he passes, not kindly, but knowingly. You realize you've been standing there for hours, and the city behind you is already calling again. That mattered because London never lets anyone watch for long. You step away from the river, leaving it to its endless appetite. You step into a Tudor home, ducking beneath a low lintel designed for shorter ancestors. The door creaks open on swollen wood, and the first thing that greets you is smell. Smoke, damp wool, and boiled cabbage. The floor tilts slightly under your boots, and every plank seems to sigh at your weight. The ceiling is so low you feel the air press against you, thick and uneven. It's not a home that welcomes, it tolerates. The walls lean inward like tired shoulders. They're plastered with lime and horsehair, painted in colours that died centuries ago. Drafts sneak through every crack, carrying whispers from the street, gossip, prayers, and sometimes rats. That mattered because insulation wasn't a concept. Survival meant layering fabric and hope. You run your fingers along the wall and feel the grain of old labour still holding on. At the centre of the room burns the hearth, or at least tries to. The fire sputters in a small brick pit, its smoke escaping reluctantly through a crooked chimney. The air tastes like soot, and your eyes sting, but the warmth pulls you closer anyway. That mattered because fire was the family's most loyal servant, even when it choked them. You imagine the entire city breathing this same grey air, unified in mutual suffocation. A pot hangs above the flames, filled with something that might be stew. You lean closer and catch the scent of barley, onions, and a hint of salted pork. The broth bubbles lazily, releasing a steam that clings to the beams overhead. Dinner here is a group effort between patience and compromise. That mattered because luxury wasn't flavour, it was quantity. A full pot meant safety, even if the contents were humble enough to apologise for existing. The furniture is sparse and stubborn. A long wooden table, warped with time, stands in the centre. Three-legged stools wait unevenly around it, each wobbling like they're in on a joke. A small chest holds every possession that matters: linens, a few pewter cups, and maybe a comb, if fortune's kind. That mattered because Tudor comfort was measured not in softness but in ownership. A single pillow could separate you from poverty. In the corner, you see the bed, a frame of rough oak, stuffed with straw and covered in a wool blanket that smells faintly of wet dog. The sheets are coarse, scratching your fingers when you touch them. You lie down for a moment and hear the crunch of straw beneath you, the tiny movements of life that share the mattress. That mattered because privacy didn't exist. You slept with your family, your fleas, and your regrets. A small window near the ceiling lets in what little light the sky allows. It's coated in animal fat instead of glass, turning daylight into a permanent fog. Outside, you hear voices arguing, then laughter, then footsteps. The wall trembles faintly when someone slams a door next door. That mattered because the city's architecture was communal. Every sound belonged to everyone. You breathe in and realize solitude is a modern invention. Above you, the ceiling groans as someone moves on the floorboards overhead. Dust drifts down like soft grey snow, landing on your sleeve. The house feels alive, resentful maybe, but loyal. It remembers every cough, every prayer, every whispered argument. That mattered because permanence wasn't beauty, it was repetition. You exhale, and the air seems to exhale with you. A woman enters, wiping her hands on her apron. She nods politely, the universal gesture of exhaustion. Her hair smells faintly of smoke and lye soap. "Mind the pot," she says, stirring it with a wooden spoon that's been stirring for generations. That mattered because tools lasted longer than people. You watch her for a moment, realizing she moves like someone who's been awake since forever. Evening presses in faster than expected. The room grows dim, lit only by the orange shimmer of the fire. Shadows crawl up the walls, long and uncertain. You hear the faint scratching of something in the rafters. Maybe a mouse, maybe a ghost. You don't ask which. That mattered because curiosity here rarely improved your day. You just sit quietly, letting the warmth sink in despite the smoke. When night finally arrives, the fire collapses into a glow of embers. The woman tosses a blanket over herself and curls up near the hearth. Her breathing slows, steady and calm. Outside, the rain begins again, soft and inevitable. The drops patter on the roof in uneven rhythm, and you realize that, for all its discomfort, this house protects her from everything that could be worse. That mattered because safety rarely feels like comfort, only comparison. You close your eyes, letting the sound of the rain fill the silence. The smell of smoke lingers in your hair. The floor creaks once more, as if whispering a lullaby made of old wood and resignation. You drift half asleep, wondering how something so fragile has survived so long. And then you remember, so did they. Morning seeps through the window like thin soup, grey, watery, and unsure of itself. You wake to the smell of smoke and porridge, two things that never fully leave this room. The fire is awake again, crackling with renewed optimism, though it's still burning yesterday's wood. A pot simmers quietly over the coals, releasing a smell that's half grain, half determination. You stretch and immediately regret it. The ceiling reminds you where you are. The woman stirs the pot, humming a tune that sounds older than the furniture. She ladles the mixture into wooden bowls, the surface trembling like jelly. "Oats and water," she says proudly, as if announcing a feast. You take a spoonful. It's warm, thick, and completely devoid of joy. That mattered because food here wasn't meant to be enjoyed, it was meant to continue you. You chew anyway, finding comfort in the monotony. Outside, a rooster calls, slightly off-key, followed by the clatter of carts and boots. The city's heartbeat returns. You step out into the morning fog, the smell of the river mixing with the smoke of breakfast fires. The air feels heavier now, carrying the collective sigh of thousands who woke up simply because the bells told them to. That mattered because routine was faith disguised as exhaustion. You walk on, half awake, half obedient. At a corner, a man sells bread from a cart, shouting prices between coughs. The loaves are dark, hard, and dusted with ash. You hand him a coin and take one. The crust cracks under your teeth, revealing a center that tastes faintly of earth and smoke. It's not good, but it's something. That mattered because appetite didn't wait for pleasure, only opportunity. You wash it down with a swallow of cold ale, the Tudor version of optimism. A boy nearby hawks fresh milk from a wooden pail, shouting, "Warm from the cow," as if that's a promise, not a warning. You watch a woman fill her jug, sniff it, and nod approvingly. The smell is thick, animal, slightly sour. That mattered because freshness was temporary and pride eternal. You take a sip and feel the texture coat your tongue. The flavor of unfiltered life, both intimate and slightly threatening. Further down the street, a group of apprentices eat, standing up, huddled near a doorway to avoid the drizzle. Their breakfast is bread dipped in ale and sprinkled with salt. They laugh loudly between bites, shoulders bumping in the cold. You realize happiness here isn't rare, it's just short. That mattered because joy doesn't need luxury, it only needs pause. You catch yourself smiling, a small surrender to their rhythm. The bells of St. Paul's toll again, deep and deliberate. The sound rolls across the rooftops, shaking loose bits of dust and pigeons. Each note feels heavier than the last, like someone reminding the city to keep pretending it's awake. That mattered because Londoners didn't measure time, they endured it. You glance up at the grey sky, wondering if it's ever been blue. In an alley nearby, a street vendor roasts chestnuts over a small fire. The smell cuts through the fog, warm, nutty, slightly sweet. You stop for one, the shell cracking beneath your fingers, releasing steam that smells like comfort. You bite into it, and for a brief moment, the city tastes kind. That mattered because even in decay, there's always one thing that feels worth waking for. A man pushes past you, muttering curses about taxes and rain. His cloak smells like mildew and ale, the Tudor perfume of disappointment. You step aside and watch him disappear into the crowd. Everyone here seems to be moving somewhere important, but no one looks certain of why. That mattered because survival in London wasn't about direction. It was about momentum. You follow the flow, trusting it to lead you nowhere in particular. The market opens wider as the sun climbs, weak but persistent. Stalls bloom like mushrooms after rain. Apples, wool, candles, fish, even the occasional rumour. The air fills with voices, each one claiming to sell something the others can't. You listen, amused, realizing the loudest thing in the city is ambition. That mattered because hope sells best before noon. You buy nothing, but you leave richer in smell alone. By midday, the porridge in your stomach feels heavy, like ballast for a ship that isn't moving. The heat of the fires fades, replaced by damp chill crawling up your sleeves. You glance back once toward the home you left, the crooked walls, the woman stirring, the smoke escaping through every crack. It's not comfort you miss, but consistency. That mattered because predictability is the closest thing to peace in Tudor London. You take another bite of bread, chew slowly, and swallow. The taste is still grey, but you don't mind anymore. The city hums around you, imperfect, relentless, alive. You breathe it in, let it sit heavy in your chest, and keep walking. Breakfast is done, and so is mercy. By mid-morning, the city begins to roar. The clang of metal, the creak of wheels, and the low hum of thousands of people grinding through the same day echo through the narrow streets. You feel it in your chest. Not sound, but vibration. It's the heartbeat of labor. The smell of sweat and iron fills the air, mingled with the sweet rot of the Thames. London doesn't work quietly. It announces its exhaustion. You pass a blacksmith's forge where sparks bloom like orange fireflies in the dark. The heat spills into the street, washing over you in waves. The hammer strikes again and again, each impact a sermon about endurance. That mattered because repetition was holiness here. Not devotion to God, but to survival. The smith barely looks up, his shirt soaked, his face streaked with soot that might as well be armor. Across from the forge, women kneel beside baskets of linen, scrubbing them raw in grey water. Their hands are red and cracked, knuckles shining like polished stone. They talk while they work, their voices dry and matter-of-fact, gossip and complaint woven together like thread. That mattered because speech was fuel when wages weren't. You catch the rhythm in their voices and realize the city runs on two sounds, hammer and breath. A group of apprentices rushes by, carrying planks of wood. Their laughter bounces through the air. young and unbothered. One drops aboard, gets scolded, laughs anyway. You envy their ignorance. Apprenticeships were brutal, long hours, little pay, cramped beds, constant hunger, but they offered something close to hope. That mattered because ambition was the only legal sin. You watch them vanish into a workshop, shouting over the noise. Further down, you reach the docks again, where men haul barrels from ships, their backs bent, their skin glistening like copper in the morning light. The air tastes like salt and effort. Orders are shouted in every accent: English, Dutch, French, sometimes curses in Latin for old time's sake. That mattered because London was already global, long before it could spell it. You hear the slap of ropes, the groan of ships, and feel the weight of empire being built one splinter at a time. Near the river, tanners soak animal hides in pits of urine and lime. The stench crawls down your throat and stays there, stubborn as regret. The workers barely flinch. Their noses gave up long ago. They hum as they stir, moving through the stink like fish through water. That mattered because comfort is just repeated discomfort. You realize London's strength isn't in its towers or its kings. It's in the people who no longer smell their own misery. A merchant strides past, his coat lined with fur that looks far too clean for this neighborhood. His boots shine, his expression doesn't. He counts coins as he walks, muttering under his breath. People part for him automatically, an invisible current of deference. That mattered because wealth in Tudor London was gravity. It bent everyone else's movement. You step aside too, and without meaning to. You hear singing from a nearby alley, not cheerful, but steady. A group of laborers carry stones, chanting a rhythm to keep time. Their song rises above the sound of hammers, blending into something hauntingly beautiful. Lift, hold, breathe. It feels like prayer, but it's just physics. That mattered because survival sounds spiritual when it's synchronized. You listen until it fades behind the next wall. A bell rings again, not for church this time, but for lunch. Workers sit wherever they are, pulling bread from cloth bags, drinking ale that's already warm. No one talks much. The silence feels heavier than noise, a pause thick enough to chew. You taste the air, yeast, sweat, and resignation. That mattered because rest wasn't reward, it was maintenance. Everyone eats quickly, like the food might escape. The afternoon drags forward, and the sky shifts from silver to a dull beige. You see a boy asleep under a cart, his hands still black from soot. No one wakes him, even the foreman just looks and nods. That mattered because compassion here isn't loud. It's practiced in silence. You walk past, careful not to step on his dreams. When evening comes, the tools quiet one by one. The last hammer drops, the last bucket empties, and a strange stillness falls across the city. You realize London never truly rests. It just pauses between punishments. That mattered because weariness here was a communal religion. And tonight, everyone believes. You feel it before you see it. The faint, sour tang in the air, the scent of something too familiar to name. The street is quieter now, too quiet. A cart rattles past, its driver calling, "Bring out your dead," in a tone that's somehow both bored and urgent. You freeze, watching him toss a body wrapped in cloth onto a pile that already looks indecently casual. The wheels roll away, leaving streaks in the mud. The houses around you shutter their windows. Behind every closed door, someone coughs. You can hear it, that wet, tearing sound that never hides for long. London has been sick for years, you realize? Plague is just its seasonal confession. That mattered because disease wasn't an event. It was punctuation between rains. You breathe shallowly, though it hardly helps. The air already belongs to someone else's lungs. At the corner, a man in a wide-brimmed hat and a beaked mask tends to the sick. The smell of vinegar clings to him like a second cloak. He carries a pouch of herbs, rosemary, sage, mint, and waves it lazily in front of his face. The gesture looks holy but feels desperate. That mattered because medicine in Tudor London was theatre with better costumes. You step aside, giving him space to pretend to save someone. You spot a sign painted crudely on a door. Lord, have mercy on us. Red crosses mark the plague houses, warnings to anyone still pretending they have choices. Inside, you hear crying, the shuffle of feet, the sound of water being poured and never drunk. The silence afterward is sharper than the screams. That mattered because grief was the only noise that couldn't be taxed. You keep walking, slower now. A priest moves from house to house, muttering prayers through the wood. His candlelight flickers against the walls, trembling like it already knows how this ends. The wax drips down his hand, and he doesn't flinch. Faith here is blistered but steady. That mattered because the church's job wasn't to heal, it was to count. You realize hope and accounting use the same tone when spoken often enough. You turn into an alley that smells of rot and smoke. Fires burn in barrels, their heat meant to cleanse the air. It doesn't. The smoke smells of fat and desperation. A group of men throw herbs into the flames, thyme, juniper, lavender, watching them curl and vanish. The scent turns briefly sweet, then sour again. That mattered because superstition was science's older, more poetic cousin. You cough, half laughing, half choking. Further ahead, a woman dumps a bucket of ashes onto the street. You see what's inside, grey dust and something heavier. She meets your eyes for half a second before closing the door. The sound of the latch is the loneliest thing you've ever heard. That mattered because survival is sometimes impolite. You walk faster, though there's nowhere safer to go. The bells toll again, but this time they sound muffled, as if even they are tired of announcing death. Each tone lands heavier, slower, less sure of its own authority. The sound rolls across the rooftops and disappears into the river. That mattered because death here isn't dramatic, it's routine. You realize that the city's noise, even at its loudest, has always been trying to cover this silence. A child runs past you, barefoot, laughing. You freeze, confused by the sound of joy. His mother shouts from a doorway for him to come back, her voice sharp with fear. He doesn't. The laughter fades, swallowed by fog. That mattered because innocence in Tudor London wasn't lost. It was stolen by circumstance. You stand there, not sure whether to smile or mourn. When night falls, the city smells stronger. Vinegar, smoke, and rain mixing into something almost beautiful. You hear the last carts rolling through the mud, the soft thump of cloth, the low murmur of prayers. The stars don't appear tonight. Even the sky knows better. You pull your cloak close, your breath fogging in the cold. That mattered because sometimes history feels too alive to touch. You keep walking, careful not to look back. Evening settles over London like wet wool. Smoke drifts low across the rooftops, catching the last light and turning it copper. Inside a tavern near Fleet Street, the air feels thicker than soup. The ceiling sags from decades of laughter and spilled ale, and every candle flickers as if doubting its own courage. You hear the clatter of mugs, the creak of benches, and the rhythmic slosh of ale hitting wood. The smell, yeast, sweat, roast meat, and failure wraps around you like a familiar blanket. You find a seat near the fire, though calling it warmth feels generous. The flames snap and spit, occasionally protesting their own wood. A man across from you raises his mug in greeting, his grin missing more teeth than it keeps. He smells of onions and pride. "To the Queen!" he shouts, and half the room mumbles back. That mattered because loyalty here was measured by volume, not conviction. You raise your mug too, deciding it's safer that way. The stew arrives in a wooden bowl that might once have been clean. It steams, thick and brown, with chunks of something pretending to be beef. You taste it cautiously. It's salt, pepper, and hope. A rat scurries along the wall behind you, bold as a waiter, pausing to sniff a discarded crust. No one reacts. That mattered because disgust was a luxury reserved for the healthy. You take another bite, trying not to think about which meat deserved credit. A group of sailors at the next table argue about the new world, their accents thick with rum and exaggeration. "A land of gold and coconuts," one claims. "A land of death and Spaniards," another mutters. They laugh until it becomes coughing. That mattered because optimism was London's cheapest currency. You sip your ale, watery and sour, yet oddly comforting. The taste is bad, but reliably bad, a flavour that keeps you anchored. A musician begins to play a lute, half-tuned, half-hopeful. The melody wobbles like a drunk climbing stairs, yet everyone listens. The notes weave through the smoke, softening the edges of the room. You feel your shoulders loosen, your breath slow. That mattered because music here wasn't performance, it was anesthesia. You let it carry you for a moment, forgetting the smell, the noise, the river of fatigue running beneath it all. Near the door, a fight breaks out, brief, loud, and quickly forgiven. Two men argue over a spilled drink, then embrace like brothers after exchanging insults inventive enough to impress the devil. That mattered because violence in London was just punctuation. It ended with laughter or silence, never with apologies. You smile, realizing the city's chaos somehow organizes itself without help. A woman passes selling pies from a tray. The crusts are golden, the filling uncertain. You buy one anyway. It's hot and delicious until you reach the middle, where something unidentifiable crunches. You decide not to investigate. That mattered because curiosity was responsible for half of London's food poisoning. You keep eating, content with ignorance seasoned by hunger. The tavern grows louder as night thickens. Stories swell, lies stretch, and the fire burns lower. People laugh at jokes that aren't funny and toast to dreams that aren't possible. You feel the warmth of it all, the shared illusion that tomorrow might arrive with less mud. That mattered because hope, drunk in company, almost tastes real. You sip again, slower this time. Someone sings now, a slow ballad about love or debt. It's hard to tell which. The voices join one by one until the tavern becomes a single, living thing humming into the dark. The sound vibrates through your bones, heavy and warm. You lean back, closing your eyes. That mattered because belonging doesn't require affection, only rhythm. For one soft minute, you belong here, completely. When you leave, the air outside feels colder, the fog thicker. The noise of the tavern fades behind you, replaced by the soft scrape of rats along the gutters. The city exhales around you, damp, noisy, alive. You realize the rats aren't pests here, they're participants. That mattered because London never excluded anything that could survive. You walk on, your boots squelching through history. The moon hides behind smoke, and the streets glisten with rain that never fully falls. Somewhere far away, church bells count a day that refuses to die. You pull your cloak tighter and smile to yourself, half drunk on warmth, half on resilience. That mattered because endurance, in this city, is the only intoxication that lasts. The next morning greets you with the scent of iron. You follow it through a narrow alley to a small shop marked by a striped pole, red for blood, white for bandage. Inside, the air is sharp and metallic, sweetened faintly by clove oil. The floor glistens in places you'd rather not inspect too closely. A man stands by the window sharpening a blade, humming as casually as if tuning an instrument. The sound slides through the air like silk with bad intentions. He greets you with a smile, too wide, too confident. His apron is stained in a way that suggests both experience and carelessness. On the wall hang tools of confusion, razors, saws, and brass bowls, all gleaming with ambition. Haircut or surgery? He asks cheerfully. That mattered because professions in Tudor London often multitasked. You laugh, but he doesn't. You realize quickly he's not joking. A man sits in the chair already, pale and sweating, clutching his arm. The barber ties a cloth around his bicep, humming louder now, rhythm matching the man's breath. The blade flashes clean and quick. Blood spurts into a waiting bowl, dark and warm. The patient groans, the barber nods approvingly. A healthy flow, he says, as if admiring good wine. That mattered because bloodletting was the medical equivalent of deleting your browser history. Pointless, satisfying, and occasionally fatal. He pours a little vinegar over the wound, wipes it with a cloth that has seen more sins than Sundays, and hands the man a cup of ale. Drink, it steadies the humours. The patient obeys, trembling. You smell the iron more strongly now, thick and familiar. The barber whistles softly, flicking the blade dry. That mattered because hygiene hadn't been invented yet, but confidence had. You take a step back, politely terrified. A boy enters carrying a bucket of water and a bundle of herbs. He empties the bucket into a tub already tinted red. The water swirls like diluted wine, catching light in strange ways. He hums too, though off-key. Apprenticeship here begins early. That mattered because learning medicine meant desensitizing yourself faster than empathy could interfere. You watch him scrape the floor with sawdust and pride. In the corner, a shelf holds glass jars of strange things, leeches floating lazily, powders, dried roots, and what might be a human tooth labelled miracle. The barber notices your stare. Charms, he says. They keep away bad spirits. You nod, though you're not sure if he means literal or metaphorical ones. That mattered because medicine here relied equally on anatomy and imagination. You wonder which saves more people. A woman enters, holding her child. The boy's arm is swollen, purple at the wrist. The barber examines it, grunts, and begins grinding herbs into a paste. The smell fills the room, sharp, green, earthy. He spreads it gently, wrapping the limb in linen that smells faintly of beer. "He'll live," he says, which sounds both like reassurance and guesswork. That mattered because healing in London meant mostly waiting while pretending you helped. He gestures to the chair. "Your turn?" he asks. You decline with what you hope is a polite smile. "A shave, perhaps," he offers. The razor gleams like a joke. You shake your head, and he laughs, wiping his hands on the apron. "Suit yourself," he says, already calling for the next victim. "Sorry, client." That mattered because efficiency outlived empathy here. You make a mental note never to sneeze within a mile of this place. Stepping outside, the air tastes fresher but not clean. You can still smell iron on your skin. Down the street, another barber pole spins lazily in the wind, its colors bright against the gray. You wonder how many lives were shortened in the pursuit of health, how many illnesses survived their cures. That mattered because progress is usually paved in good intentions and poor sanitation. You breathe deeply, regretting it instantly. As you walk away, you pass a man selling blood sausages. The irony makes you laugh out loud, startling a nearby dog. The vendor winks, raising his knife in greeting. "Fresh this morning," he shouts. You don't ask from where. That mattered because London's sense of humor has always been circular. You keep walking, feeling the city's pulse beating quietly beneath your own. Evening comes again, wrapped in velvet and smoke. You hear music before you see the light. A slow, stately tune drifting from a hall near Westminster. You follow the sound to a grand doorway framed by torches, their flames flickering gold against polished oak. Inside, the air smells of wine and roast meat, so thick and fragrant it almost feels like you could chew it. The laughter is softer here, trained and expensive. You realize quickly, this is how the other half digests faith. A servant leads you through a hall where the walls glitter with tapestries, saints, kings, angels, and at least one hunting dog that looks better fed than half of London. The table stretches the length of a sermon, lined with silver plates and polished goblets. Candles crowd every inch, dripping slow rivers of wax. That mattered because excess here wasn't waste, it was communication. Every ounce of luxury shouted what words couldn't. I'm still winning. The guests arrive in layers of silk and perfume, the air thickening with powder and ambition. Women's sleeves brush against roasted pheasants and honeyed pies. Men speak through mouthfuls of meat, gesturing with bones like punctuation. You sit quietly, feeling the floor beneath you vibrate with conversation. That mattered because politics in Tudor London wasn't written in ink. It was whispered through gravy. You sip your wine carefully, unsure if it's safer to listen or to drink. At the head of the table sits a man with hands too clean to trust. His smile is wide, but his eyes stay busy, scanning faces for agreement. He raises a golden cup. "To Her Majesty," he says. The room echoes him instantly, the cheer loud enough to hide the tremor of fear underneath. That mattered because loyalty here was survival's costume. You lift your own cup, trying to look sincere. A servant presents a roasted boar, its mouth stuffed with an apple, eyes glazed with fat. The smell fills the hall, sweet, smoky, almost divine. You feel your stomach tighten, both in hunger and guilt. Meanwhile, outside these walls, beggars line the gates, waiting for scraps that never fall. That mattered because feasts here were sermons in inequality. each bite chewed louder than Charity ever prayed. Musicians play in the corner, their lutes bright and hopeful. A dancer twirls across the floor, her dress brushing against the spilled wine. Her movements are perfect, too perfect, like something trained by fear of imperfection. The guests clap, more for themselves than for her. That mattered because art here existed only to reassure power. You find yourself clapping too, the sound hollow but polite. Someone passes a bowl of custard, thick and golden. You take a spoonful, and it melts like buttered sin. The sweetness coats your tongue, followed by a faint taste of smoke. You wonder how something so delicate can exist beside a city that smells like sewage. That mattered because London never separated filth from beauty. It fermented them together until they became flavor. You swallow, and the guilt tastes almost as good as the sugar. A poet stands and recites a verse about the Queen's mercy. His voice trembles slightly, but no one notices. They're too busy admiring how flattering adjectives sound when soaked in wine. When he finishes, polite applause ripples through the hall, measured, careful. That mattered because even admiration had etiquette here. You think of the tavern last night, louder, messier, freer. You almost miss the smell of rats. As the night deepens, conversation softens into murmurs. The candles burn lower, dripping wax onto untouched fruit. A woman nearby laughs too loudly. A man beside her stops her with a look sharp enough to draw blood. You watch her bow her head, smiling anyway. That mattered because survival at this table required silence disguised as grace. You look down at your own plate and decide the silence tastes fine. When the final toast is made, servants sweep in like ghosts, clearing bones and bowls before the guests even notice they're done. The hall smells of extinguished candles and overripe perfume. You step outside into the cool air, blinking. The night smells different here, cleaner, freer. You realize it's not purity, it's just distance from privilege. That mattered because peace always costs proximity. You exhale, grateful for the cheaper air. Behind you, laughter still spills from the windows, faint and echoing. Ahead, the street yawns wide and dark. The sound of the river hums faintly in the distance. You think of the feast again, the gold, the wine, the wasted light, and it already feels like fiction. That mattered because luxury ages faster than hunger. You walk on lighter, though you can still taste sugar on your tongue. The streets after midnight belong to no one. The air feels colder, sharper, soaked in fog that glows faintly from dying torches. You hear footsteps before you see them, the measured, deliberate rhythm of the night watch. Their lanterns sway through the mist, halos of weak light revealing more shadow than safety. "All's well," one calls out, voice flat with habit. The words sound less like reassurance, more like denial. You follow their route through the narrow lanes. The houses lean closer now, walls sweating from the night's moisture. Somewhere above, a shutter opens, then closes quickly. The city doesn't sleep, it hides. You step over puddles that reflect candlelight like small, trembling stars. That mattered because Tudor London never truly darkened. It just forgot to shine. The night here feels alive, but not kind. A man stumbles from an alley, clutching his side. The watch pauses, their lanterns catching his face, pale, streaked with blood. "Thieves!" he gasps, pointing backward, but the street behind him is empty. The watch exchanges looks half concern, half calculation. One helps him up, while another mutters, "Don't die here, mate, you'll ruin the cobbles." That mattered because compassion in London was practical, not poetic. You keep walking, pretending not to watch. Further along, a group of men huddle near a doorway, playing dice under a broken sign. Their laughter slices the quiet, sharp and low. Coins clink. One spots you, grinning, but loses interest when he realizes you have nothing worth stealing. That mattered because invisibility is the safest wealth. You nod politely and move faster. The dice hit stone again. Click, click, click. The rhythm of poverty gambling for permission. The smell of smoke thickens. You turn a corner and find a man standing over a torch, eyes wide, muttering about witches and fire. He drops the torch into a puddle, hissing steam. "They fly at night," he whispers, glancing upward. You look too, though you know it's only clouds. That mattered because fear was communal entertainment here. You walk away before he decides you look suspicious. From somewhere nearby, you hear singing, a woman's voice, clear but distant. It drifts from a second-story window, slow and sad. The words blur into the fog, but the melody feels ancient, like a lullaby sung by the city to itself. You stop to listen. That mattered because beauty here always hides behind danger. The song fades as the wind shifts, replaced by a dog's bark and the soft squeal of rats in a drain. A watchman taps his staff against a door, calling out curfew. Inside, a child cries, a mother hushes softly. The sound travels through the walls, warm and small. You realize most of London's tenderness happens behind closed doors, invisible to history. That mattered because love doesn't need witnesses, it just needs survival. You linger a moment longer before moving on. Near the river, you find a row of taverns closing for the night. The last drunks spill into the street, singing about women they never met and debts they'll never pay. One slips into a puddle, laughs, and keeps singing. The watch helps him up, muttering about God's patience. That mattered because sin in London wasn't rebellion, it was recreation. You smile, the air tasting faintly of beer and absolution. The fog thickens as you reach the bridge. Lanterns flicker weakly, their reflections trembling in the water. You hear the creak of the wooden planks beneath your boots, the soft groan of the river below. Somewhere far away, a church bell strikes 2. The sound rolls through the mist like a heartbeat too slow to worry about. That mattered because even time here feels tired. You lean against the rail, letting the cold soak in. You look down at the river. It moves lazily, indifferent to everything it carries. Shadows drift beneath the surface, maybe boats, maybe debris, maybe something else entirely. The moon slips behind the clouds, and the world goes briefly blind. You stand very still, hearing only your own breath. That mattered because quiet in London was never peace, it was suspense. You wait for the city to exhale again. When the clouds part, the light returns soft and blue. The watchmen move on, their lanterns shrinking into distance. The air smells of damp wood, iron, and dawn not yet convinced it should arrive. You turn back toward the city, its outline jagged against the horizon, and whisper a small thank you to no one in particular for surviving another night. That mattered because endurance, even uncelebrated, is still a miracle. You walk home through fog that feels like forgiveness. The next morning begins with gossip. You hear it before you see it. 2 women whispering near a well, voices low but sharp. "She spoke to her cat," one says. And the bread rose too fast, replies the other. Their eyes dart around, checking for witnesses. The word witch hangs between them, weightless yet dangerous. You feel the chill settle in your bones. That mattered because belief in Tudor London was stronger than evidence and twice as hungry. A man passes holding a bundle of twigs, muttering prayers. He stops near a doorway marked with chalk and spits 3 times for luck. His hand trembles, whether from faith or fear, you can't tell. The smell of tallow candles and dried herbs lingers around him like protection. That mattered because religion here was part theatre, part therapy. You realize Londoners prayed not for salvation, but for safety from their neighbours. At the edge of the market, a preacher shouts about sin, his voice cracking like thunder over mud. The devil walks among you, he warns, gesturing at everyone and no one. Children laugh nervously. Mothers pull them close. His words flutter through the air like ash, sticking to whoever listens too long. That mattered because authority in Tudor times wasn't earned. It was shouted until exhaustion resembled truth. You watch him sweat under his collar and wonder if he believes himself. You find yourself outside an apothecary, the air thick with the smell of dried rosemary and ground mercury. Inside, jars of strange colors line the shelves, crushed roots, powdered shells, something that might once have been snake. The apothecary greets you with calm eyes, already knowing you'll buy hope, not medicine. For sleep, he asks, shaking a small vial. You nod, though you're not tired, just human. That mattered because even reason needs rituals. Down the street, you spot a woman tied to a cart, her hands bound. A crowd follows, half curious, half entertained. The bailiff reads accusations, herbs, whispers, storms. The woman stares straight ahead, her face calm. You can see her lips moving, though no sound escapes. Someone throws mud. That mattered because fear is contagious, and faith is its favorite carrier. You turn away, ashamed of your comfort. Later, near the cathedral, you see another crowd, this one silent. A saint's relic is being paraded through the streets, a bone in glass, carried like a promise. People kneel as it passes, crossing themselves quickly, eyes darting between devotion and doubt. The air smells faintly of incense and damp wool. That mattered because belief, in any direction, was still an attempt to feel less small. You bow your head, not from faith, but from understanding. A merchant's wife lights candles in her window, each flame trembling like confession. For protection, she whispers, though she's alone. You watch the soft glow reflect off her face, making her look briefly holy. That mattered, because light here wasn't for seeing, it was for remembering what not to fear. You stand quietly for a moment until the wax drips onto your boot and the spell breaks. As night deepens, the fog thickens again, curling around chimneys and prayers alike. Somewhere, a dog howls. You hear a door slam, a lock turn, a whispered blessing. The city seems to pull its blankets tighter, bracing for whatever unseen thing might be real tonight. That mattered because superstition was London's lullaby, soft, irrational, but oddly comforting. You find yourself whispering, "God keep me," without knowing why. The bells toll once more, deep, distant, and too slow. You count them without realizing it, each note sinking deeper into the mist. Somewhere far off, someone screams. No one rushes to see why. That mattered because curiosity here was an invitation to die. You turn toward your lodging, the sound of your boots swallowed by fog. Inside, you light a candle. The flame flickers, bends, but holds steady. You exhale slowly, feeling the warmth settle against your face. The shadows dance along the walls, almost human in shape. For a brief moment, it feels like company. That mattered because fear and comfort often wear the same mask. You lie down and let the city breathe around you, loud, haunted, faithful, and utterly alive. Morning brings the sound of bells again, wedding bells this time, clear and insistent. You follow the noise through narrow lanes until you reach a small church draped in flowers and fog. The scent of roses battles with the smell of wet wool. Guests stand outside in muted colors, pretending to smile. The bride looks terrified, the groom merely resigned. That mattered because love in Tudor London was less romance and more real estate. You linger, invisible among the watchers. Inside, the priest speaks too quickly, his Latin melting into the murmurs of the crowd. The couple exchange vows that sound more like contracts. The groom's family nods approvingly. The bride's mother dabs her eyes, though you're not sure if it's joy or relief. That mattered because weddings here were economic negotiations disguised as miracles. You watch the rings exchange hands and wonder if the metal feels cold. Outside, musicians play a tune that almost sounds happy. Children dance in the mud, unbothered by meaning. The bride's dress drags through puddles, collecting the city like memory. The guests laugh at something you don't hear. That mattered because celebration here was just survival in costume. You catch the bride's eyes for a moment, wide, uncertain, defiant. She smiles anyway. Later that afternoon, in a darker corner of London, another couple meets behind a bakery. Their hands touch briefly before pulling apart. Their smiles are small but real. They whisper promises that neither will keep. Soon, maybe, when it's safe. The air smells of yeast and secrecy. That mattered because true love in this city had no witnesses, only excuses. You step away quietly, unwilling to turn their moment into history. In the tavern that night, men boast of wives they barely know and lovers they can't afford. Laughter fills the air, coarse and confident. One man toasts to women who save us or kill us, whichever comes first. The room erupts in cheer. That mattered because affection here was always defensive. You sip your ale, tasting both envy and exhaustion. Upstairs, a widow counts coins by candlelight. Her husband's shoes sit untouched by the bed. She wraps her shawl tighter and stares at the flame until it gutters. Marriage in Tudor London didn't end with death. It lingered like debt. That mattered because love here was measured not in passion, but endurance. You whisper a quiet respect to the walls that have heard too many promises. The next morning, you pass a matchmaker's stall in the market. Wooden hearts hang from strings, painted with names and prayers. A wife for a butcher, one reads, a husband with strong hands. The vendor smiles, toothless but optimistic. That mattered because loneliness in London was a business. You buy nothing, but the sight of hope feels strangely medicinal. A man and woman argue nearby, voices rising above the clatter of carts. "You promised," she shouts. "So did God," he replies, walking away. The crowd doesn't even turn. That mattered because heartbreak here was background noise, frequent, brief, and unreported. You watch her stand there, shaking, before wiping her eyes and selling her eggs as if nothing happened. At dusk, you see an old couple walking hand in hand by the river. Their pace is slow, their silence comfortable. They share a loaf of bread, tearing it in half without a word. The sky burns orange above them, and the water glows like copper. That mattered because love, when it survived this city, needed no witness, no church, no apology. You feel your throat tighten in quiet awe. The bells ring again, this time for evening prayer. You turn back toward the city, the air tasting faintly of wine and rain. Somewhere, the newlyweds sleep, the lovers hide, the widows count. Life continues, steady as breath. That mattered because love here wasn't fragile, it was patient. You exhale and keep walking, letting the sound of the bells fade into the fog. The afternoon hums with noise again, the kind of living chaos that defines London. You follow the sound to a crowd gathered near the river, where a man in bright stockings and louder opinion stands on a wooden crate. He's reciting a verse about politics disguised as poetry. The audience laughs, some out of humor, others out of hunger for distraction. The smell of roasted nuts mixes with sweat and river fog. That mattered because entertainment here was cheaper than bread, but fed better. A boy nearby sells oranges, weaving between the listeners like a dancer. "A penny, a peel, a laugh," he calls, his grin too wide for the century. You buy one out of pity, then realize he's already gone with your coin. The orange is green and bitter. That mattered because survival here begins with charm and ends with theft. You laugh anyway, peeling it slowly, the juice sharp and cold against your fingers. The performer now mocks a nobleman by name. Gasps ripple through the crowd, followed by laughter louder than fear. You notice a guard in the corner smirking too, though his hand stays on his sword. That mattered because rebellion in London was tolerated as long as it rhymed. You clap softly, your applause both admiration and self-preservation. Behind the crowd, another kind of theatre unfolds, a barber shouting jokes as he shaves a man's beard, a fishmonger singing prices to a made-up melody, a dog chasing its own tail while an old woman cheers it on. The city performs for itself, uninvited, unrehearsed. That mattered because joy here didn't need permission. You stand still, watching life pretend not to notice its own brilliance. A group of boys with wooden swords act out a duel, their movements exaggerated, their laughter too loud. One collapses dramatically, clutching his chest, and the others applaud the tragedy. You realize Londoners rehearse death daily, just in case. That mattered because humor here was a coping mechanism disguised as art. You smile, though your chest feels heavy. You wander toward the globe, where a new play draws a different kind of crowd. Merchants, scholars, thieves, and tailors, shoulder to shoulder. The air vibrates with anticipation and body odor. You hear snippets of Shakespeare before you see him, words sliding like silk through mud. The world's a stage, someone recites nearby. That mattered because in Tudor London, everyone believed it literally. You stand among them, feeling the script write itself around you. The play begins and the audience transforms. A drunk man cries during a love scene, a pickpocket steals applause, and wallets with equal talent. The actors shout above the noise, their sweat catching the light like glitter. The crowd throws apples, cheers, weeps, laughs, all in one breath. That mattered because theatre here wasn't escape, it was reflection. You watch yourself in every fool on stage. When the play ends, the applause feels endless. The actors bow, masks slipping just enough to reveal exhaustion. You realize they'll drink in the same taverns as the audience tonight, spend the same coins, catch the same sicknesses. That mattered because fame in London never climbed higher than the smell of ale. You clap until your hands ache anyway. Outside, vendors sell pies and gossip about the actors. "The blonde one's in love with a merchant's wife," one says. "He'll die of that faster than plague," replies another. Laughter ripples through the smoke. That mattered because scandal here was social glue. You buy a pie and pretend not to listen, though you absolutely do. As dusk thickens, the crowd disperses into the mist. The theatre's glow fades, replaced by the grey of ordinary life. The stage empties, the lines dissolve, the applause lingers. You realize the performance never really stops, it just changes venue. That mattered because every Londoner was an actor, every day an improvisation. You take a bow to no one, then walk home smiling. The streets quiet down again, and for the first time, you hear your own footsteps. The echo sounds strange, like applause that forgot its reason. You keep walking, the fog rising around you like curtains closing. That mattered because the show always ends when the audience falls asleep. You wake the next morning to laughter. It's muffled but real, coming from a group of workers gathered near a cart of onions. One of them tells a story about a constable who fell into the river chasing a goose. The punchline is terrible, but everyone laughs anyway. You realize they're not laughing at the joke, they're laughing because they still can. That mattered because humour in Tudor London wasn't pleasure, it was survival's side effect. A tavern nearby opens early. You step inside, drawn by the sound of mugs meeting wood. The air smells of malt, damp straw, and optimism. A man with a scar across his cheek raises a toast to another day of not dying. The room cheers. That mattered because cheerfulness here was rebellion. You drink too, the ale flat but faithful. At the next table, two women argue about the cost of bread. Their tone is sharp, their laughter sharper. They insult each other's mothers, then clink mugs like sisters. That mattered because forgiveness in London was faster than wit. You smile, realizing cruelty here was often just language without punctuation. A fiddler begins to play a tune in the corner, fast, clumsy, joyful. The sound fills the room, shaking dust from the rafters. People stomp, clap, spill, shout. You feel your pulse match the rhythm, the music tugging you back from exhaustion. That mattered because exhaustion, like grief, dances better when drunk. You tap your boot along, pretending you remember joy. Outside, a jester performs tricks for coins, balancing a plate on his nose, juggling apples, pretending to faint. Children giggle, adults pretend not to. He bows dramatically every time someone tosses a penny, his grin too wide to be sincere. That mattered because happiness here was both labor and currency. You throw him a coin anyway. His gratitude feels rehearsed but kind. Later that day, you see laughter in stranger places, a priest giggling during confession, a butcher making puns about pigs, a washerwoman humming love songs to her laundry. The absurdity feels contagious, that mattered because sanity in Tudor London depended on absurd repetition. You start laughing too, not because it's funny, but because it feels correct. The sun breaks through the fog for the first time in days, lighting up the rooftops in dirty gold. People pause to squint at it, like skeptics confronted with proof. Someone jokes that the Queen must be smiling again, and the crowd laughs as if she's listening. That mattered because reverence always hides inside ridicule. You look up too, almost believing it. At dusk, the laughter fades into singing. Workers return home humming the same tune they started with that morning. The sound carries through alleys, over chimneys, across the river. It's not beautiful, but it's honest. That mattered because contentment here never needed to last, just long enough to get to tomorrow. You walk slower, letting the rhythm guide you. You stop by the river and watch the reflection of torches flicker on the water. The light trembles but never dies. People pass behind you, still laughing softly, still alive. That mattered because London's resilience is loudest in its noise. You take a deep breath, the air tasting of smoke and sugar, and feel almost clean. When the bells ring for curfew, the laughter finally stops. The silence that follows isn't empty, it's full, warm, satisfied. The city exhales like a drunk collapsing into bed. That mattered because survival, no matter how small, deserves applause. You smile into the fog and whisper, "We made it." You wake to the sound of shouting, sharp, angry, too familiar. Outside, two men wrestle in the mud, their curses echoing off timber walls. A small crowd gathers, not to help, but to watch. The smell of sweat and ale hangs over the scene, sour and steady. One man bleeds from his lip, the other laughs through broken teeth. That mattered because violence here isn't scandal, it's weather. You stand still, knowing better than to interfere. A constable appears, stick in hand, coat half-buttoned. He separates them lazily, scolding them like children. "Enough of that," he mutters, though his tone says, "Carry on when I leave." The crowd disperses as quickly as it formed, their entertainment spent. That mattered because justice in Tudor London wasn't blind, it was distracted. You watch the constable accept a coin and walk away whistling. Further down the street, a thief runs, fast, barefoot, eyes wild. Behind him, a merchant shouts, waving his arms but not giving chase. The boy disappears into the fog, swallowed whole. A woman nearby shrugs. "Probably hungry," she says, turning back to her stall. That mattered because morality here depended entirely on appetite. You realize pity is just judgment with manners. You pass the pillory in the town square, its wood dark with old rain and worse things. A man stands locked inside, head and hands trapped, his hair matted with eggs and insults. People pass, tossing whatever they can spare, rotten food, laughter, advice. He takes it all silently, eyes fixed on nothing. That mattered because shame here was public currency, spent daily and never redeemed. You walk by quietly, unsure who deserves pity more, him or the crowd. At a nearby tavern, you overhear two men bragging about smuggling wool through the docks. "Tacksmen are just thieves with pens," one says, slapping the table. The other nods, grinning. Their mugs clink in toast to corruption. That mattered because law here was a rumor, and everyone edited it. You find yourself half smiling, half condemning, which is exactly what London expects of you. In the shadows by the bridge, you notice a woman lifting a purse from a drunk's pocket. Her movement is smooth, practiced, almost graceful. When she catches your eye, she winks. The drunk snores on, unaware. That mattered because survival here wears many costumes, and all of them fit perfectly. You don't tell anyone, you've learned silence pays better. Later, you see the same woman arrested by nightfall, dragged by her hair through the mud. The crowd follows, curious, unbothered. She spits in the guard's face, and someone laughs. "She'll hang," a boy whispers beside you. You nod, but don't look away. That mattered because punishment here wasn't about guilt, it was choreography. You feel your stomach twist, though you're not sure if it's fear or familiarity. At the gallows, the rope creaks like an old floorboard. The condemned stand silent, their faces pale under torchlight. The executioner yawns. Someone in the crowd sells apples. The priest prays loudly, his words bouncing off laughter. That mattered because death in London was public entertainment, an appointment, not a tragedy. You stare until it's over, then blend into the applause. Walking home, you pass graffiti carved into a wall. God sees, man forgets. The letters are crooked, desperate. You trace them with your finger, feeling the grooves in the wood. That mattered because truth here never needed permission to exist. You whisper it under your breath and keep walking, careful not to look over your shoulder. In the distance, church bells toll, softer now, tired from repetition. The sound rolls across the rooftops, blending with the quiet laughter of men, counting their winnings and women locking their doors. London doesn't hide its sins, it sells them. That mattered because guilt fades fast in a city this loud. You walk faster, though the noise follows you home. When you finally reach your room, the silence feels suspicious. You sit by the window, listening for one more scream or song. Nothing, just the river murmuring below, washing the blood, the coins, and the stories away. That mattered because in Tudor London, everything is forgiven by water, even if it shouldn't be. You close your eyes. The sound almost like peace. The next dawn arrives grey and unhurried. Church bells toll again, slower this time, lower, their echoes wrapped in fog. You follow the sound through winding alleys until you reach a small chapel. The air outside smells of wax and rain-soaked wood. People stand in silence, their black clothes glistening with dew. No one speaks. The city has learned how to mourn efficiently. That mattered because death here wasn't news, it was schedule. Inside, the chapel glows dimly with candlelight. The floor creaks beneath cautious steps. The priest's voice rises softly, his Latin familiar to everyone and understood by no one. You watch as a mother wipes her nose on her sleeve, her face expressionless. The coffin is small, too small. That mattered because loss in Tudor London rarely waited for old age. You inhale slowly, the air thick with incense and resignation. The ceremony ends quickly. Outside, men lift the coffin into a cart. The wheels grind through the mud, joining the city's endless procession of grief. A boy tosses a handful of flowers, half crushed, half brave. You watch them fall, bright against the grey. That mattered because beauty here never lasts longer than it needs to. You follow silently until the crowd dissolves. Down the street, you pass another funeral, almost identical, different names, same prayers. The mourners blend with merchants, with beggars, with strangers. London's streets don't pause for sorrow, they absorb it. That mattered because mourning here is background music, constant, quiet, oddly comforting. You walk slower, afraid to forget too soon. A grave digger whistles as he works, his spade slicing rhythmically through wet soil. "Ground softer today," he says when you pass. His tone is neither sad nor cruel, just factual. Behind him, rows of wooden markers tilt like tired teeth. That mattered because repetition makes tragedy manageable. You nod and keep walking, the whistle following you like a prayer with no words. In the afternoon, the sky clears slightly. A woman washes black garments in the river, her reflection distorted by the current. She hums softly, something gentle, hopeful even. The sight catches you off guard. That mattered because grief here doesn't end, it adapts. You watch her wring the cloth, her movement steady, her face unreadable. At a nearby tavern, laughter bursts through the door, sudden and alive. Inside, men drink to forget, or maybe to remember differently. To the ones who lasted, someone shouts. The room cheers. That mattered because mourning in London often looked suspiciously like celebration. You raise an invisible glass and drink the air. Evening returns, and the bells toll again, for someone else this time. Their sound drifts over rooftops and smoke, blending with the cries of hawkers packing their stalls. You realize that in this city, every hour belongs to both life and death. That mattered because existence here was never owned. It was borrowed, briefly and noisily. You breathe deeply, tasting rain on the air. You find yourself back by the river, where candles float downstream. Tiny, trembling lights sent by families too poor for funerals. The flames flicker, some dying quickly, others carried far. The water reflects their movement like a heartbeat fading. That mattered because remembrance here was measured in moments, not monuments. You watch until the last light disappears. When night falls, you return home and lie in bed, the sound of bells still echoing faintly. You close your eyes and realize you're not sad, just aware. That mattered because grief in London isn't a wound, it's weather. You let it wash over you, steady and familiar, until sleep comes like fog rolling in from the river. Night again, and London breathes differently, slower, quieter, as if afraid to wake what it can't explain. The moon hides behind smoke, and the air smells of damp stone and extinguished fire. You follow a narrow path toward St. Paul's Yard, where candles flicker in the distance. People move between the gravestones with purpose, their faces half lit, half lost. You realize this isn't mourning, it's dinner. That mattered because the living here dine with the dead as naturally as with family. A man kneels beside a grave, unwrapping bread and salted fish. He places a piece on the stone before taking his own bite. The gesture is matter-of-fact, tender, without ceremony. "For my brother?" he murmurs, raising a cup of ale to no one you can see. That mattered because grief in Tudor London didn't whisper. It conversed. You almost say cheers out of reflex. Nearby, children chase each other between the markers, their laughter echoing oddly in the cold air. A woman scolds them softly, her tone half amusement, half prayer. The smell of roasted chestnuts drifts from a vendor who has set up near the gate, selling warmth to those who pretend to visit rather than remember. That mattered because business always follows belief. You buy a handful, their heat seeping into your palms like borrowed life. The priest walks among the crowd, muttering blessings. He doesn't seem surprised by the chatter, the food, the laughter. His candlelight trembles on faces lined by smoke and faith. You realize religion here isn't about silence, it's about participation. That mattered because heaven, in this city, had to share space. You bow your head, just in case. A gust of wind passes through, carrying the smell of rain and earth. You hear the faint scrape of stone, a sound too human to ignore. You glance toward the crypt entrance, where the door shifts slightly, moved by nothing visible. The crowd notices, pauses, then resumes as if nothing happened. That mattered because denial here is ritual, not ignorance. You take a deep breath and pretend you didn't see it either. An old woman sits nearby with a candle balanced on her knee. She hums an unsteady tune, something between lullaby and lament. Her eyes are closed, her hands steady. You can't tell if she's remembering or rehearsing. That mattered because memory in London blurs easily into prophecy. The flame flickers once, then steadies, and you feel strangely safer. As the hour deepens, the food disappears, replaced by bottles and stories. A man tells of dreams where his dead wife visits nightly to scold him for gambling. The crowd laugh, but their laughter sounds relieved. That mattered because superstition here is emotional housekeeping. You laugh too, even though you're starting to believe him. The rain begins softly, polite at first. People raise their cloaks but don't leave. The candles hiss, sputter, and die one by one. The darkness grows thick, textured, almost alive. Someone starts singing a slow, minor melody that rolls like the river. The words are lost in mist, but the sound sinks deep into your chest. That mattered because comfort doesn't always require comprehension. You hum along, out of rhythm but sincere. When the rain stops, the crowd thins. The priest closes the chapel door, the vendor packs his chestnuts. The laughter fades into wet footsteps. You remain for a moment longer, the ground beneath you soft and forgiving. The smell of wax and mud lingers in the air. That mattered because London never separates life from death, it just rearranges the table. You whisper goodnight to no one and start walking home. The fog swallows you before you reach the street. Your shoes squelch in the mud, and you hear the distant sound of bells, slow, steady, patient. Each toll feels less like a warning, more like a reminder. That mattered because history isn't written, it's echoed. You walk on until even the sound gives up, leaving only your breath and the quiet comfort of continuity. By morning, rumour arrives before sunlight. Whispers ripple through the marketplace. Someone saw the Queen. Not here, of course, but near enough for imagination to stretch. The merchants talk faster, the beggars beg louder, even the pigeons seem better fed. The air vibrates with invisible ceremony. That mattered because royalty in Tudor London wasn't presence, it was weather, capable of changing everyone's posture. You straighten your own without meaning to. Down the street, guards in bright livery march past, their boots striking rhythmically against cobblestones. The sound is clean, orderly, reassuring. People bow, then immediately resume shouting prices. Reverence has an expiration time. That mattered because respect in this city competes with commerce, and commerce always wins. You watch a butcher bow mid-sale, never pausing his knife. A herald passes, announcing decrees in a voice trained for distance. "By Her Majesty's command," he begins. But no one listens after the first few words. The people nod anyway, pretending compliance. That mattered because obedience here is performance art. You realize everyone in London deserves an award for Best Supporting Citizen. Later, you wander near the palace walls. The gates glimmer faintly in the morning haze, guarded by men who look carved from stone. You smell rosewater drifting faintly over the stench of the city, a fragrance so fragile it feels cruel. Behind those walls, plates of silver clink, musicians rehearse, and fabrics change more often than fortunes. That mattered because opulence here isn't admired, it's studied for survival tips. You breathe it in like gossip carried by wind. A servant rushes out with a bucket, tossing water onto the street. It splashes near your boots, soaking the hem of your cloak. "Apologies," he says, not looking up. You glance inside through the briefly opened gate, a garden, impossibly green, where someone's laughter sounds practiced. Then the door slams shut, and you're back with the mud and flies. That mattered because paradise in London always has good locks. You walk along the palace perimeter, hearing snippets of music through the walls, a lute, a distant choir, maybe someone tuning an ego. The sound is haunting, almost divine, yet muffled by stone. You imagine the Queen herself, powdered, perfumed, dressed in sunlight and politics. People speak her name like prayer and fear mixed together. That mattered because power here wasn't human, it was atmospheric. You feel it press against your chest, invisible but heavy. A beggar woman kneels nearby, holding a wilted rose. "For the Queen," she says softly to no one. Her hands tremble, her voice breaks, yet she smiles. The guards ignore her. You drop a coin in her palm. She doesn't thank you. She just keeps smiling. That mattered because devotion here doesn't expect audience. It just hopes to be noticed. You walk away before the moment becomes unbearable. Further down the street, you see children playing with sticks, pretending they're swords. "I'm the Queen," one shouts, swinging proudly. "Then I'm her ghost," another replies. They collapse in laughter, rolling through the dust. That mattered because even power becomes parody once it reaches the playground. You find yourself laughing too, quietly. The sky turns pale as the day ends. You look back toward the palace. The torches along the wall glow like distant stars. The city below them glimmers with its own lesser lights. Taverns, fires, candles burning too low. You realize both sides of the wall survive on the same thing: attention. That mattered because London's hierarchy was built from shared exhaustion, not difference. You breathe deeply, tasting rosewater mixed with smoke. When the bells ring again, their sound overlaps with laughter, prayer, and wind. For a moment, it all harmonizes: grime and glory, hunger and perfume. You close your eyes, letting it blend into a single sound that feels like the whole city exhaling. That mattered because even divided, London breathes together. You stand still in the fog, listening until the last note fades into the night. Night folds over London like damp linen. The torches fade one by one, leaving the streets to memory and moonlight. You walk through the silence, your boots sinking softly into mud that remembers too many footsteps. The air smells of cooling ash and wet wood. Somewhere, a window creaks open, then closed. That mattered because London never sleeps entirely. It naps in fragments, breathing unevenly through the mouths of its millions. A cat slinks across the alley, eyes glowing pale in the dark. You hear the faint rattle of a cartwheel, distant and uncertain. Every sound feels larger now: your breath, your heartbeat, the soft sigh of wind between broken shutters. The city's chaos has collapsed into rhythm. That mattered because rest in Tudor London wasn't found, it was negotiated. You slow your steps, allowing the quiet to win. You pass a baker's shop where the ovens glow faintly. The air is warm, fragrant with yeast and patience. Inside, a man works alone, shaping dough with steady hands. His face is calm, illuminated by firelight. You realize this is what peace looks like here, routine surviving exhaustion. That mattered because comfort in this city is always borrowed from labor. You breathe in deeply, grateful for the smell. Beyond the shop, the river murmurs softly, its voice low and forgiving. The reflection of the moon trembles on its surface like a secret, unsure of itself. You lean against the rail, feeling the cold seep through your sleeves. That mattered because water never forgets. It just keeps moving. The Thames carries everything: breadcrumbs, ashes, prayers, and the soft hum of a city dreaming unevenly. Far away, a church bell chimes once. The note hangs in the air, lonely but complete. You feel it in your ribs more than in your ears. The sound fades slowly, leaving behind a quiet so gentle it almost startles you. That mattered because silence in London is an accident and therefore precious. You close your eyes, letting the absence of noise hum against your thoughts. A lantern flickers above a doorway, its flame trembling in the wind. You watch the light bend, struggle, and recover. The small persistence feels holy. That mattered because faith here doesn't belong to churches. It belongs to things that keep glowing despite the draft. You whisper a goodnight to the flame as if it can hear you. The smell of rain returns, faint and metallic. The first drops fall softly, hitting stone, wood, water, and you. You don't move. The air thickens, cool and forgiving, washing the day's residue from everything. That mattered because cleansing in this city has never been clean, only merciful. You tilt your head back, eyes closed, and let it fall. Somewhere nearby, a door opens. A woman hums softly, sweeping her doorstep. Her song drifts through the rain, slow and steady. The words are lost, but the tone feels like kindness. That mattered because tenderness in London often hides behind routine. You listen until the sound fades, the broom tapping rhythmically against stone. You keep walking. The city blurs at the edges, the walls, the cobbles, even the stars. The rain smooths everything down, softens the corners, turns movement into memory. That mattered because London, for all its hardness, knows when to hush. You feel yourself exhale deeper than before. When you finally stop, the world feels distant but close, heavy but gentle. The smell of smoke, bread, and rain mix into something strangely sweet. You realize this is as peaceful as London gets, and maybe that's enough. That mattered because peace doesn't need perfection, just permission. You give it, quietly, and the night accepts. You light a candle in your room, its flame small but certain. The wax melts slowly, pooling like liquid gold around the base. Shadows stretch across the wall, soft and deliberate. You watch them move, realizing how much light owes its beauty to darkness. That mattered because everything in Tudor London glows harder for being surrounded by ruin. You rest your hand on the table, feeling the warmth slide across your skin. The room smells of tallow and old wood. The window rattles in the wind, and the floor creaks beneath invisible footsteps. You feel the weight of the day settling on your shoulders, mud, smoke, laughter, loss, all of it blending into a single memory that no longer asks for attention. That mattered because fatigue here is honest. It never lies about its reasons. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it press gently against you. Outside, you hear footsteps pass, slow and heavy. Then silence. The candle flickers, bending toward the sound, then straightens again. You smile as if the flame has decided not to worry. That mattered because courage in this city isn't loud, it's consistent. You breathe out, matching its rhythm. The wax drips down the side, pooling at the base in uneven shapes. You trace one with your finger, warm and soft. It reminds you of the city itself, melting, rebuilding, shining in cycles. That mattered because London never truly burns out. It just changes form. You sit quietly, watching time behave like wax. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmurs. The sound rolls low and patient, a sigh more than a warning. The candle flickers but holds. The flame stretches taller for a moment, then relaxes. That mattered because resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers still here. You smile, whispering back, "Me too." The air feels heavier now, carrying the scent of rain mixed with smoke. The room grows warmer, safer. You notice the quiet hum of your own breath, the soft scrape of fabric against wood. The flame wavers one last time, then steadies. That mattered because calm isn't absence, it's balance. You lean back, eyes half closed, the light blurring into soft gold. The candle shortens, the flame shrinking slightly, but refusing to die. It bends toward you as if acknowledging your patience. You nod, silently grateful for its company. That mattered because even the smallest light deserves witness. You rest your chin on your hand, content to keep watch. Outside, rain resumes, gentle now. It patters on the roof in even rhythm, syncing with your pulse. The sound feels circular, each drop beginning and ending in the same instant. That mattered because repetition is the soul's favorite lullaby. You breathe in time with it, slow and steady. You reach out and cup the flame briefly, feeling its heat kiss your palm before pulling away. The afterglow lingers, faint and pleasant. The shadows on the walls seem to lean closer, softer now, less like ghosts and more like company. That mattered because fear transforms when acknowledged. You smile again, realizing the candle's job is already done. When you finally blow it out, the smoke curls upward like a sigh, fragrant and final. The room darkens, but doesn't feel empty. That mattered because darkness isn't punishment, it's rest. You whisper a thank you to the night and lie back, letting the scent of extinguished flame carry you gently towards stillness. The first light of morning arrives like a hesitant apology. It doesn't blaze, it seeps, thin and pale through the cracks in the shutters, crawling across the floorboards in silence. The air tastes clean but unfamiliar, touched by rain and smoke. You sit up slowly, feeling the stiffness of sleep lift from your bones. That mattered because in Tudor London, dawn doesn't promise relief. It only resets the struggle. You stretch, quietly grateful for the chance to begin again. Outside, the city exhales. You hear the slow creak of carts starting their day, the clop of hooves on wet cobblestone. A rooster crows somewhere distant, his voice lost among the chimneys. The smell of baking bread drifts faintly through the fog, sweet and steady, cutting through the sourness of last night's rain. That mattered, because scent is the city's gentlest forgiveness. You open the window, and the chill greets you like an old friend. The river moves lazily, light catching its surface like scattered coins. Mist curls above it, slow and deliberate, blurring the edges between water and air. A ferryman pushes off with his oar, his movements quiet and practiced. You watch the ripples spread, widening until they vanish. That mattered because time here doesn't pass, it disperses. You breathe in the rhythm, your heartbeat matching the flow. A woman sweeps her doorstep across the street, humming softly. Each stroke of the broom sounds like punctuation in a poem she doesn't know she's writing. A child trails behind her, dragging a wooden toy through the mud, its wheels squeaking with stubborn joy. That mattered because life continues here, not through triumph, but through small, stubborn noises. You find yourself smiling. You walk outside, the air crisp and cool. Puddles mirror the sky, muted blues and silvers. Footprints mark where others have already begun their day, some deep, some fading fast. The city smells of coal and wet stone, but also of bread, tallow, and patience. That mattered because London doesn't clean itself, it just grows new layers of living over old ones. You feel the ground give slightly beneath your boots, as if remembering yesterday's weight. A church bell rings once, slow, deliberate, heavy with condensation. The sound vibrates through your chest, then fades into mist. Somewhere. Another bell answers, and another, until the city hums softly with the chorus of survival. That mattered because music in London never truly ends. It just changes instruments. You close your eyes, letting the sound sink through you like warmth through wool. You pass a baker handing out the day's first loaves. His hands are dusted white with flour, his face lit by the orange glow of the oven. He nods to you, wordless but kind. You nod back, both of you acknowledging the simple miracle of morning. That mattered because humanity in London exists in nods, not declarations. You take a loaf, the crust still crackling from heat. As the sun climbs higher, the fog begins to retreat, curling away from rooftops like someone folding back a blanket. You see the spires of churches, the crooked chimneys, the river glinting faintly. The city looks softer now, almost forgiven. That mattered because beauty in London always hides behind persistence. You stand still, watching as colour slowly returns to the world. You tear a piece of bread and eat. The flavour warm and grounding. The crumbs stick to your fingers, and you lick them off absently. Around you, people move in quiet procession. Labourers, merchants, mothers, each following invisible patterns that never quite collide. That mattered because harmony here isn't planned, it's accidental and all the more perfect for it. A faint breeze moves through, carrying the smell of lavender from a window box above. The petals tremble, releasing scent into the cold. You inhale deeply, surprised by the softness of it. That mattered because even in filth, beauty insists on being noticed. You let the scent linger, a small reminder that gentleness has always survived worse. You look toward the sky, blue now, though pale and thin, and realize the day has begun fully without you. The noise is returning, wheels, bells, vendors, laughter. You don't mind. That mattered because peace here is always temporary, and that's what makes it real. You turn back toward your door, the sun finally touching your face. Inside, the air is warmer, quieter. The candle stub from last night still sits on the table, melted but dignified. You smile at it, feeling something like gratitude. That mattered because memory isn't about remembering. It's about noticing what stayed. You exhale slowly, letting the last of the night leave your lungs. You sit by the window again, watching the light shift across the wall. Dust drifts through the air, glowing like tiny stars in the morning sun. The city outside hums steadily, not loud, not quiet, just sure of itself. You rest your chin on your hand and think of everything you've seen, the streets, the river, the laughter, the filth, the endless stubbornness of it all. That mattered because history isn't a story. It's a heartbeat that refuses to stop. You remember the faces, the baker, the widow, the thief, the mother by the river. None will be written in books, yet all built the city brick by breath. Their voices echo faintly in your head, weaving together like a song you can almost hum. That mattered because memory isn't ownership, it's inheritance. You carry their noise quietly as they carried those before them. Outside, clouds drift lazily across the sky. The light softens, turning gold, then grey again. You realize how much of London's beauty comes from its uncertainty. Every corner hides something broken, something alive. That mattered because perfection would have killed this city long ago. You find comfort in the unevenness. The bells ring once more, slower now, as if tired but content. You close your eyes, counting them by feel rather than sound. Each note fades into silence, and for a brief moment, you can almost hear nothing at all, just the faint pulse of your own breathing. That mattered because peace isn't given, it's noticed. You open your eyes again, slower this time. A soft breeze enters through the window, carrying the smell of distant rain. It brushes your face, light as thought, cool as truth. You smile, realizing that even air here has a personality, stubborn, ancient, and slightly sarcastic. That mattered because humor is London's oldest survival instinct. You laugh quietly to yourself, the sound startling in its gentleness. You glance at the street below. A boy chases a dog, a woman argues with a vendor, a man hums to himself while sweeping. The ordinary feels holy now. You realize that maybe the miracle isn't survival, but repetition, the way life insists on returning, uninvited but welcome. That mattered because endurance is just another form of grace. You rest your head against the window frame, feeling the wood warm in the sun. The river glints in the distance, slow and reflective. It moves the same way it did last night, last century, last forever. You think of all its carried bodies, bread, secrets, love, and how it still flows without judgment. That mattered because the river is London's only honest historian. You whisper a thank you toward it, knowing it won't answer but listening anyway. As the afternoon deepens, shadows stretch across the room. You hear footsteps in the hall, voices faint but friendly. The world is waking into its ordinary chaos again. You feel no need to join it just yet. That mattered because rest, here, is rebellion. You stay seated, breathing evenly, letting the noise remain background music. The light dims into soft gold, brushing your face with warmth before fading. You feel your eyelids grow heavy, your mind softening at the edges. The room hums faintly, the wood, the air, the distance. Everything feels circular, complete. That mattered because endings in this city never end. They just pause politely. You lie back on the bed, listening to the faint drip of water from the roof, the distant bell, the quiet shuffle of life continuing elsewhere. The air feels warm against your face. You close your eyes, the world narrowing to breath and heartbeat. That mattered because sleep is just another kind of history, one that forgets kindly. You let it take you, slow and certain, into the fog of rest. London fades as you drift, its noise dissolving into hush, its people into dreams. The smell of bread, smoke, rain, and candle wax still lingers, wrapping around you like a story that doesn't want to end. You feel the city breathing through you, imperfect, alive, relentless. That mattered because history never really leaves, it just lowers its voice. You exhale once, softly, and let it whisper you to sleep.